Hello, my friends. Welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Football Podcast. My name is Josh Norris, and I'm in a lonely studio by myself. Yes, at the end of the divisional round of the playoffs, everyone left me here by my lonesome because, John Daigle in Hartitz thought it would be a perfect time to head to Las Vegas for the FSGA conference. And why not? We can't let him off the hook that easily. So it's not just going to be me for the next 45 minutes. No. We have to get these guys on the phone, even though it is, 8:30 in the morning over there, Ian. Hopefully you're still in bed talking to me. I'm sure this is exactly how you thought your Monday morning would wind up.
Hey, man, it's always, no matter what part of the country, and I'm always ready to talk some football, even if it means having to admit that you were somewhat right on your Tyler Irvin call. So.
Well, don't jump ahead because that was the storyline of the weekend, at least in the Norris household. Ian, one, good morning. Two, you had the Sunday game. So why don't we start there because that's what's freshest in everyone else's mind. And then later on, we'll go to Daigle to hit on the Saturday games. Why don't we start with you and go with the Kansas City Chiefs against the Houston Texans. Obviously, the Chiefs won 51-31. But Ian, this game was something like we've never seen before. Let me just kind of set it up to start, and then I exactly want your thoughts and on the result and kind of the whole outcome and the storyline that happened here. The Texans went up 24-0. Then the rest of the game, the Chiefs outscored them 51-7. Ian, again, something we've never seen before. At what point did you think the Chiefs could come back?
The whole kind of game, honestly, and I don't want to say in hindsight, oh yeah, I knew they had it, but at the same time, this was the flukiest 24-0 lead I think we've ever seen. First drive of the game for Houston, Kenny Stills just completely breaks free loose when about 2 or 3 defenders flew up on Will Fuller on the bubble screen, just left him wide open, blown coverage, touchdown. Chiefs get the ball. Third down drop. They try to punt. Block punt. Touchdown. Houston gets the ball. The Chiefs get a stop. Then Tyreek drops the punt inside his own 10-yard line. So the Texans managed to put up 21 points without really doing anything all that impressive, which you could have said, hey, okay, what happens when they do start to just control the ball? But obviously we saw Patrick Mahomes and company just get the ball, do their thing, and get it going. I saw it was Romo on the game, and he mentioned how Mahomes had never been down 21 points, and we kind of joke around about what happens when Mahomes has to get into comeback mode. Well, 321 yards, 5 touchdowns is what happens.
He becomes a superhero. That's what happens. And you mentioned how it was fluky. It wasn't just fluky from how the Texans scored, how they converted offensively. It was what the Chiefs were doing offensively as well. I mean, third downs by the mid-second quarter, there was a Kelsey drop, there was a Demarcus Robinson drop, that was a Tyreek Hill drop. Obviously, the fourth downs, you had a block punt, touchdown, and muff punt that set up another touchdown. They gave a punt return that got to midfield. The turning point, and I don't want to focus solely on this one play because obviously, if there were points in the game where the Texans, at least in the first half, could get some stops defensively, but we know how bad their defense was and how great the Chiefs can be at any moment and put up, 21 points in one quarter. But there was this moment in the second quarter, Ian, where the Texans got down to the Chiefs' 13-yard line in a 4th-and-1 scenario. Bill O'Brien elects to kick a field goal to bring them 24-0 rather than attempt to go for it and then possibly go up 28-0. Is that something we should dwell on any more than I just, called attention to it? Is this a reflection on Bill O'Brien as a coach? Because we talked about it last week against the Bills, right? Where this is a team that Deshaun Watson kind of puts people on his back. He elevates everyone around him, including his head coach, and the mistakes that he might make. And again, I don't want to say that was a turning point in the game, but some might say it was the turning point in the game, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly didn't help. And we saw it, Bill O'Brien kind of rear his ugly head later in the game, too, when they were, I forget the exact score, but at this point they were down multiple scores. I want to say it was the fourth quarter. And literally, Deshaun Watson had to convince O'Brien not to punt when they had the ball in Chiefs territory. I'm not sure what Bill O'Brien is always thinking out there, but it seems like he's just making these decisions kind of off the cuff and just however he feels the game is going, which is, when you're in the middle of coaching a game, people don't think Bill O'Brien is that, at least I don't think he's that dumb of a guy per se. He's a head coach in the National Football League. He knows more about football than you and me will know our entire lives. With that said, let someone else help you make these decisions, man. I mean, that's, some of the smartest things we've heard all season in Baltimore, how Harbaugh has his, analytics guy calling him from the booth, Peterson did this in Philly a few years ago. I mean, part of being a head coach isn't having to make every single decision for your entire organization. It's being smart enough to know what decisions you should be making and which ones you shouldn't be. And just these clock management things. I saw Roto Pat had an interesting tweet. Texans built a 24-0 lead in the first half, and they somehow had 0 timeouts by the time the 2-minute warning came. Like, it's just been a recurring theme all season.
We do have construction crew beeping outside because they're backing up their trucks. I mean, Bill O'Brien might want to back up some of these decisions, the ones that he made this Sunday. I mean, there was another one where they got a look in their own half of their territory, and while in like a process format, in a process situation, going for it in that one-on-one situation when you hike the ball to your safety and Justin Reed, and he has a one-on-one tackle that he has to break against Daniel Sorensen, you might take that like 8 out of 10 times, right, Ian? Well, in this case, it didn't work out. It didn't work out. And this just speaks, though, to how special this Chiefs offense can be with Andy Reid, with Eric Bieniemy, and more importantly than anyone, it's Patrick Mahomes. Just in a situation where, this wasn't just clean, open receivers running down the field, picking up easy catches, easy plays, easy chunk yards. This was Mahomes creating space for himself. This is Mahomes rushing for 53 yards at the same time. The same player, Ian, who suffered a dislocated kneecap just like half a season ago. I don't know if we've focused enough because he certainly didn't put up the stats that he put up in 2018 in his MVP season. But right now we're getting the best of Patrick Mahomes at just the right time of this year.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. I mean, he was literally like the best quarterback we have ever seen in 2018. Wasn't as good this year, but okay, fine. Take him a notch down. He's still clearly, if not the best quarterback in the league, right there in any conversation with the top 3. And yeah, you said the rushing is just so underrated with him. And in that first Texans game that they played and they lost, a big factor in that was Mahomes re-aggravating that ankle injury and attempting to play through it. But one of the things we talked about last week, only Lamar Jackson and Ryan Tannehill average more yards per scramble than Patrick Mahomes this season. He's not like Lamar Jackson. He doesn't have these designed rush attempts, but he's perfectly good enough to keep the defense honest when, meanwhile, all those 11 guys are worried about Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce, Damian Williams running another wheel route. Like, they have so many things to worry about, and then you just forget about the quarterback for a second, and he's athletic enough to go pick up 20 yards. I thought the one interesting thing in this game that stuck out to me, though, Tyreek Hill, 45 scoreless yards, and the Chiefs scored 51 points. I mean, to me, just the wildest fantasy no-show since Todd Gurley had no touchdowns, fewer than 100 yards, and that 54-51 Rams-Chiefs shootout from last season. But I also think it speaks to just what makes Tyreek Hill so special as a football player because, I've heard people try to put him in the kind of wide receiver hierarchy throughout the league. And he's not Michael Thomas. He's not one of these super polished threats, although I do think he's a little bit underrated in terms of contested catches and downfield. But just even when he isn't doing things, his speed is just so ridiculous and so unlike any other wide receiver in the league that defenses are forced to play off, give them the 2 safeties, and that's what lets Travis Kelce and these other guys eat underneath.
And we also need to bring up Travis Kelce, 12 targets, 10 receptions, 134 yards, and 3 touchdowns. Sammy Watkins even had a day on just 2 targets, 76 yards as well. It's interesting, though, Ian, because, we talk often about Will Fuller and the impact he makes on this Texans team, right? Well, he was the team's second leading receiver, 8 targets, 5 receptions, 89 yards. And sure, a lot of the production that the Texans put up was when in the second half when they just kept trailing more and more and more. But it really does speak to me, and this is kind of a theme as we go out through these games, and I kind of want to bring it up in every single one, that, defense does matter, because if the Texans had even maybe a halfway decent defense, then they would at least be able to maintain some semblance of a 24-0 lead, yet they just gave it away immediately. But this goes back to what we talked about all season long, that this was Deshaun Watson's team. And once you run into a team like the Chiefs, that so much randomness went against them early on, when they do have some players defensively, and it wasn't Chris Jones in this game, and hopefully he'll show up later on because of that calf issue that popped up during practice this week. But like Daniel Sorensen stepped up in the place of Juan Thornhill. Tyrann Mathieu was obviously there. You have Frank Clark who stepped up as well. This is a Chiefs team that coming back from this much of a deficit, Ian, can only help them as they move forward. Because, they'll probably be down 10 points or 14 points at some point in the next 2 weeks if they continue on. But no lead is insurmountable for them. And that speaks volumes to the roster and the type of offense this team runs.
Yeah, and again, I mean, this Chiefs defense played very well yesterday. They gave up those 24 points to start, but we talked about like that was incredibly fluky. I mean, yeah, okay, give them blame for allowing the blown coverage for the Stills touchdown, but it's not their fault about the block punt and then the muff by Tyreek. So we mentioned this kind of earlier in the season, but they didn't necessarily turn this elite defense this year, but they got more playmakers. They got rid of Justin Houston, Eric Berry. They were able to get Tyrann Mathieu, Frank Clark, who didn't have the greatest regular season, but came up big yesterday and had the 3 sacks. So even if they're not like this complete lockdown defense, they at least have more playmakers than I think the Texans do. And, it's honestly it's pretty impressive the Texans got this far, because just based on their season-long rates and DVOA and some of these more, this performance statistics, like they were going to be one of the worst teams to make the Super Bowl if they were able to make that run. So I'm interested to see what they do next year in terms of maybe getting Watson more of a 3-down running back. Lamar Miller's coming back. We'll see what he's doing, but especially on that defensive side of the ball, because we know Watson can put up points on anyone, but it's going to be them getting that defense to at least respectable for them to, I think, take that next step.
Before we move on, we need to put the Texans 6 feet under, as we do for all the teams that are eliminated. So why don't I do the good and bad, since I'm waking you up at 8:30 a.m. on the West Coast, and you just tell me if you agree or add whatever colorful language you want to this. Let's start with the good. You still have Deshaun Watson on your team, and as we've seen in this game, previous games throughout the season, if you have Deshaun Watson on your team, it gives you a chance no matter what. But you also have cap space, and I think at the very least, this front office structure that, the focus is Bill O'Brien, and he just has so much control in this team. At least he understands when the team has a weakness. This past offseason was the offensive line, and he tried to go out and fix that. Obviously, the trade for Laremy Tunsil, obviously drafting Max Sharping and Titus Howard, and obviously Howard missed some time. But they identify weaknesses, and I think if there is a weakness on this team, more than a lot of other pieces, and it's not, a complete roster, but it's the defense. So I think that Bill O'Brien, as a positive, one, he has Deshaun Watson, but two, understands that the defense is probably the area that needs the most upgrades this offseason.
Yeah, you mentioned it previously. Like when Will Fuller is on this offense, they can score and put up points with literally anyone. I mean, because defenses just need to respect him and Kenny Stills deep, and then that allows DeAndre Hopkins to more or less just clear everyone out over the middle. I mean, we kind of talked about Hopkins, how this year career low average target depth, but when you have Fuller and Stills deep, I mean, that's not the worst offensive strategy. We just see Watson kind of sit back there. Sometimes it's Darren Fells instead. Even Duke Johnson every now and again, but he's just so efficient at picking out those open receivers in those short area zones, and they can also hit you over the top. So I'm with you. I mean, the Texans, they're going to be battling for playoff berth every single season. They can get 16 games out of Deshaun Watson. That's all you can ask with the franchise quarterback. Can they boost that defense? Because, J.J. Watt has not exactly been the most injury-free player over these years. And if you take, once they got rid of Clowney, there's just not enough like blue chip difference makers on this defense. I think we'll talk about that a little more of Seattle in this next game. But look, they went out and got Tunsil, but I think this next offseason, get some playmakers on defense.
And again, the good thing is I think they have somewhere around like $40 million in cap space, something like that. All right,
Ooh.
The bad part, again, the yin and the yang for each of these teams, is that Bill O'Brien's in complete control. And we talked about some of his decisions, Ian. Is it fair to even wonder if Bill O'Brien should keep his head coaching job moving forward? I mean, this is a team that got to the second round of the playoffs. And we've seen, playoff head coaches be fired before. But I'm not saying he is going to be fired, but I'm asking you the question. Do you think that this is the better way to ask it. Is it possible for the Texans to reach the top of the mountain with Bill O'Brien in complete control of this organization?
I don't think so. And look, we talked about his clock management things, but I'm just confused, like what exactly he's elevating in this offense. He's refused to really let anyone else call plays ever since he got there in 2014. He's never had top 10 scoring offense, even with all the good things Deshaun has brought to the table. So it reminds me of like Seattle and just kind of watching what Russell Wilson did yesterday. The offense is let Deshaun Watson get the ball, almost play playground football, throw lasers to his open receivers and make things happen. If you're hiring Bill O'Brien to be this offensive guru, because we know he's not there for his general manager skills and his organization and that kind of stuff. He's not really doing the offensive stuff either. So, if you can get more of a figurehead coach. We talked earlier last week when some of these coaching changes were going around, but the more movement to get a special teams guy in there that is willing to let these other coaches do their jobs. I'd be really interested to see what that happens, because for right now it just seems to me eerily similar to Seattle, where it's one incredible quarterback propping up the rest of the organization.
Let's move on to the next game on Sunday. That was the Green Bay Packers beating the Seattle Seahawks 28-23 in Green Bay. I'll read Aaron Rodgers' stat line to start. 16 of 27, 243, and 2 touchdowns. Just took 2 sacks on the day. Ian, his game as a whole was far more impressive than that stat line might suggest.
Yeah, 100%. And he was doing this. It seemed like every time he tried to throw the ball to someone other than Davante Adams, like, good things just were not really happening. It's easily, I think, the least amount of talent Rodgers has had in this receiving core in at least a couple years. I mean, I'm not sure if it's ever, but look, Davante Adams had 11 targets. Jimmy Graham had 4. Aaron Jones had 2. Nobody else had more than 1. And this has been the problem pretty much all season long. And Rodgers, he made the throws, made the big plays. All credit in the world. With that said, like, how many times do NFL defenses need to watch their players just get carved up and refuse to change anything about their defense? I mean, Seattle, the entire Pete Carroll era, they have not moved their cornerbacks. Richard Sherman, after the 49ers game, was talking about how everyone, kind of critiques him, doesn't anoint him as the number 1 cornerback. And look, I'm not saying he doesn't deserve that. Sherman's amazing. But it's just that the Seattle defense, if you move the number 1 receiver in the slot, their number 1 corner never follows him. And they just refuse to do it again and again and again. Davante Adams, both of his touchdowns came away from Shaq Griffin on double moves against a cornerback that had no business guarding him. Davante Adams, when he got the first down, that Jimmy Graham got the eventual game-sealing first down, but Adams had an awesome catch from the slot. Again, versus an underqualified cornerback. So, look, Rodgers put the ball where he needed to put it. I just wish the Seattle would have done a little bit more to help themselves out.
I'm totally with you, and we're kind of skipping ahead here, but it's worth mentioning that in one of the game-sealing plays, they did move Davante Adams into the slot. He had a one-on-one situation against Ugo Amadi, and Delano Hill couldn't cover in the back half enough, and then Davante Adams just puts a perfect route on him, especially release off the line, and creates instant separation, and it's a great throw by Aaron Rodgers. Really what this game comes down to was the starts for both teams, because I believe the Packers were up 21-3 at halftime. And it's the difference between touchdowns and field goal attempts, right? Because the Packers start off with 2 touchdown drives, or did have 2 touchdown drives fairly early on, versus 2 field goal attempts by the Seahawks and only converting 1 of those. And again, the Packers scored another touchdown on top of that. We talked about it, where Aaron Rodgers might not have had this perfect final form all season long. Well, we certainly saw it in this game. And I mentioned just, the passing yards don't show, they don't break out to 243. But those third down conversions, those second and long conversions, those plays where on 10 plus yards down the field, Aaron Rodgers was 6 of 6 for 145 yards and 2 touchdowns. Those were teardrop, pinpoint accuracy passes. And while he might not have shown it all season long, Ian, that's something where I think it can be a bit of an issue when you think of, hey, these guys, this is what they were for 16 games, so this is who they're going to be once they reach the playoffs. No, you have to look at the potential of these players, what they've also shown in little spots during the season. And we've seen Aaron Rodgers just be magnificent, be better than anyone else at his position for seasons, years and years. That one showed up in this game. And it doesn't necessarily matter in those situations what the situation is, because a perfect ball beats perfect coverage, and it happened in this game.
And that was the scary part about writing off this Packers team all season long. I mean, we talked about just where they, none of their statistics on either side of the ball denoted anything resembling a 13-3 team. And, they had a nice little run on offense from around weeks 4 to weeks 10 or something like that. Really, when Davante Adams got hurt, it was almost good for the offense, because it kind of forced them to get more creative, get Aaron Jones more involved, get these different pieces. I think they became a little less predictable. But, yeah, you said it. When it's Aaron Rodgers in a must-win game, he is more than capable of winning that game almost single-handedly anytime. So I think another takeaway there, look, all the credit in the world to Aaron Rodgers, but Davante Adams, man, he missed 4 games this year, but you talk about guys just getting force-fed targets, still has it. He's underrated as a after the catch runner. I think a lot of his career has just been attributed to being Aaron Rodgers' number one receiver, kind of getting overloaded with these targets. But there's not many receivers that kind of combine his ability after the catch, at the catch point, and then just some of the routes he was putting on display yesterday were just incredible. So I would love to see this offense next season. I know they still got more games to play, but if there's an offense in the league that just needs to add another solid wide receiver, it's the Packers.
Yeah, and we'll preview the games later on in this week, but Aaron Rodgers, Aaron Jones, Devontae Adams were enough in this game. The question is if they're going to be enough against that San Francisco 49ers defense. And the other question is, Aaron Rodgers, even in this game, was looking for like that perfect downfield receiver to be open to create separation, and he was allowed to hold on to the football in this game, because the Seattle pass rush just is non-existent. It's not there unless Clowney's going to get upfield. Well, we certainly know the 49ers don't allow you to do that consistently. So, again, that's a different matchup and one that is obviously different in what pieces might stand out. Before we move on, we have to talk about this Seattle team because, in the first half, this was a situation where they tried to maintain their identity that they've carried on throughout the entire season, Ian. And that led to, Marshawn Lynch getting 12 carries for 26 yards. Travis Homer helped it along with his own 3 carries. But they were put in a 21-3 hole at halftime, then allowed Russell Wilson, which in this iteration of this offense is the best chance for success, to carry this team in the second half. And they had opportunities to come back and potentially win this game. I'm not saying that they should have done that or it should have happened, but the potential was there. And it's because they finally allowed Russ to maintain control. Why won't Pete Carroll and Brian Schottenheimer, Ian, allow Russell Wilson to start a game like this?
It's a great question, Josh, that I do not have the answer to because I don't get it either. And look, they could even be smarter just about how they want to be run first. I mean, Russell Wilson in the second half was just taking off, picking up all these chunk runs on scrambles after avoiding a sack or doing whatever. And it just got me thinking, like, I'm not used to seeing Russ really take off all that much. Turns out, per PFF, Russell Wilson had 7 yards all season on design runs. I'm not saying it needs to be a Lamar Jackson getting 10 per game, but look, I think we can all agree that when you have a scrambling threat or a rushing threat at quarterback, merely, just show one read option early in the game. We see the Cowboys just allow with Dak Prescott. Show 1 or 2 read options, and all of a sudden that defensive end is not flying as hard into the line. And guess what? That gives you more holes on the inside for your physical running back. So it's just, if you're going to run the ball this much, like, why not do it out of shotgun? Why not try to spread the field and give your guys some lanes? I feel like too many times it's under center with a fullback. We're going to outpower you with our guys. And it's just lazy, and it's not putting your best players in a position to succeed.
You mentioned how, this Pete Carroll defense is what it is. I would say this Brian Schottenheimer offense is what it is. And that's frustrating. I mean, Travis Homer and Marshawn Lynch carried 32 times for 58 yards in the playoffs. Like that, you can't put them in a situation for them to carry the ball 32 times. I understand, I believe in running backs a lot more in this bubble that we live in, Ian. And so I understand a little bit more if, Chris Carson was in the backfield or even Rashad Penny was in the backfield. But you basically have Eddie Lacy trotting out there in Marshawn Lynch and this late round guy who you didn't want on your game day roster basically all season long, and Travis Homer, and now they're focal points and focal pieces in the first half offense. Like, the game plan was just to be the Seahawks and be Brian Schottenheimer. And I guess I'm trying to think of why they would do that. Is it like a predetermined belief that Russell Wilson would take sacks, that the offensive line can't hold up? Because all of us can look at this team and say that Russell Wilson, maybe with, Patrick Mahomes and with Lamar Jackson and with Deshaun Watson, is so good at kind of absorbing pressure and still making ridiculous plays outside of it. It seems like we know that better than the coaches that are attached to Russell Wilson know that.
I think that first point you touched on is the only kind of plausible thing I can think of as to why Schottenheimer won't open up this offense more. And there's really no statistical evidence to back it up, which means it's, probably not a good game plan. But yeah, I think just the thought of putting Russell Wilson back there to pass 40 times a game, knowing the way he plays, knowing the hits he sometimes exposes himself to from holding the ball too long is what freaks him out. With that said, Russ has been the Seahawks starting quarterback since 2012. He has never missed a single game in his entire career. I would just really like to see them try opening up and let's see how it goes, because Tyler Lockett had 10 targets. He caught 9 of them. DK Metcalf had 5 targets. He caught 4 of them. Even Hollister caught 5 of 6 targets. I mean, every time they tried to pass, good things happened, and they just refused to keep doing it more.
There's also situations where I'm sure the Seahawks were like game planning during the week. And they're like, yeah, we'll have Jacob Hollister block Preston Smith one-on-one, and that should do it. No, it doesn't do it. Like, I don't know. I mean, look, Russell Wilson has a Super Bowl. He almost has another one. He doesn't have an MVP trophy. He's one of the, and we talked about this in our review of the season, like our 5 favorite players of the decade. He was on my list. I mean, he is so much fun to watch. And he should be even more fun because Tyler Lockett exploded in this game to the tune of, 136 yards. DK Metcalf had a couple plays as well. But I just worry and wonder if, like, he's just being handcuffed in this situation. I think the answer is yes right now. And they're a consistent team. Other than the Patriots, they are the team of the 2010s. Yet, here we are, questioning their final decisions, their roster, their makeup, their game plan, their view of how they even view their own team. And I don't know if we're going to get past this. And that's I don't want to like look back on Russell Wilson and have these regrets, especially as he gets older and older and can't do the same things that he did earlier in his career. But I think we're heading that direction, Ian. I think we are.
Yeah. And look, those early Seahawks teams were different. They did go through Marshawn. They did go through the defense, and that was successful for those Seattle teams. That is not these Seattle teams. Right. I mean, this is now Russell Wilson's not only offense, but it's his team. Play to your team strength, which is trying to hold the ball, score points, because your defense, isn't doing it. I mean, like you said, Clowney, if he gets pressure, he'll make some plays. But other than him and Bobby Wagner in that front 7, there just hasn't been a steady source of consistent playmakers really all season. So we'll see. They stick with their Seattle cover 3 scheme, which we see again and again and again. Assistants try to take it elsewhere. They get hired DC jobs. Doesn't work the same because none of them have Earl Thomas playing free safety in the middle of the field. So it's just lazy to me. It's what they won with 5 years ago, and they're trying to still do it. And you know what? Like, I get it. You won a Super Bowl with this. It would probably be incredibly hard to turn away from something that was so successful for you. But I just really hope going the next season, like you said, as Russell Wilson is still in his prime, that they kind of realize this, go to more of a spread out system, and hopefully just improve the supporting cast.
And you compare that to a team in their own division, right? In the Los Angeles Rams, who have been quite consistent the last 2 years, more or less, last 3 years, more or less, right? But, Sean McVay looks at his own style, looks at his own coaching staff, and says, hey, we aren't changing enough to week offensively, and we weren't doing that defensively enough. And while Wade Phillips has, created and built this very good team defensively, we're moving on because, the teams like the Patriots change game plans week to week. I want to be able to fluctuate what I do week to week offensively and defensively. And I think, the 49ers do that, and I'm not sure the Seahawks do that. So it's one where I think Russell Wilson allows you to maintain a consistently winning team, but I'm not sure if you can, overcome other teams that are willing to try new things. One more thing, Ian. I keep going back to the Packers and like the individual defensive pieces they have. And like in the final few weeks of the season and here in the playoffs, it looks like as a whole, and I understand Russell Wilson threw for 265 yards. They rushed for 110 yards, whatever. But like the individual pieces can show up in those individual moments. And to me, this is why defense does matter. Like Preston Smith making that play, Zadarius Smith winning one-on-one situations, Jair Alexander, Darnell Savage, Blake Martinez stuffing a run near the goal line. Like these are individual players that have the ability to win their individual matchups, and to completely like disregard that when you look at games or look at it afterwards or even beforehand, to me is like forgetting about a major portion of these one and done, win or go home scenarios. And I think that's dangerous analysis and evaluations that, our football bubble gets into.
Defense obviously matters, and pass defense absolutely matters. I mean, I think that's the big, and one of my big takeaways here. I really thought Seattle could be able to do their usual, run first, we're going to run the ball. I thought it might work for them because literally only the Dolphins allow more adjusted line yards per rush this season than the Packers. I mean, they could really not slow down opposing run games all season long. But again, we've talked about this on the pod throughout the year. Like we see again and again and again, these run funnel defenses that are really good against the pass and not so good against the run. usually that just means they're a really good defense more times than not, especially in a situation like this where we know they have Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith, Yair Alexander. I know he had his hiccups earlier in the season with Amari Cooper and some things, but still a very talented cornerback. When you do have these 3 to 4 actual like blue chip talents, guys that can go out there and really make difference making plays, that's a good sign of a good overall defense. So I think it matters. I think we need to continue to improve our ways of forecasting defensive performance, particularly in the run game, because moving forward, I'm just hesitant, unless we're talking about like the Panthers or Jaguars, to really assume that someone's going to be able to run on a defense, because more and more we're seeing you got to be able to stop the pass, and you can always bring up extra guys in the box to stop the run.
Finally, let's bring up Tyler Ervin. Ian, we've talked about the Packers for 15 minutes now, and we haven't brought up the player who was the 4th leading yards getter for the Packers. Basically equaled Marshawn Lynch's involvement in this game, minus the touchdowns. But look, Tyler Ervin played 11% of the snaps, 2 carries, 25 yards. Give me some credit here, Ian. Give me some credit.
He played 7 snaps. Jamal Williams had 9. I will give you some credit. I think he got sourced into this. I'm not sure where the heck Tyler Ervin came from, but you know what? He hit a nice little 18-yard run on the reverse. He did show some burst. You were right here, Josh. I will give you that. And also, kudos to the Green Bay Packers coaching staff for giving Aaron Jones 53 snaps. Jamal Williams only had 9. Tyler Ervin had 7. It was one of the annoying things this regular season with Jamal and Aaron Jones playing such close snap counts, even though Aaron was just continuously more efficient as both a rusher and receiver. And I'm not sure if it was maybe just Jamal Williams still not 100% with that shoulder injury or what, but good for Matt LaFleur playing the better players throughout the game.
That was Ian Hartitz. Now it's time for John Daigle, who we're also waking up super early in the morning. Dagsy, you had the Saturday games. Let's talk about them. Let's start with the one that, it's actually entertaining. One that, I'm still trying to recover from attempting to process because it didn't make a lot of sense. It was the Tennessee Titans beating the Baltimore Ravens 28-12. Daigle, I think more than anything, this game speaks to just how lucky and random one-game sample sizes can be, because obviously the Titans just got out to a completely bonkers start, going up, 28-6 by the end of the third quarter. And it was just a lead that the Ravens seemed like as soon as they tried to approach and get to the line of maybe even starting a comeback, they were just never able to follow through with it.
First of all, I had forgot that time zones existed until I was eating mashed potatoes at 2 in.the morning with Ian to my right, which is a story for another day. But yes, we're recording early, and if you had told me Lamar Jackson would rush for 143 yards and total of 508 yards and touch the ball more than any player in any game in NFL history, I would think that, yes, the Ravens had come out on top by a lot. But no, as you said, it was the Titans' stranglehold. And just by the time that the Ravens tried to punch back, they were far, far behind and far too behind to catch up. It was crazy because the whole time I was watching it, I just kept thinking, no, this is when the Ravens come back. Much like that Chiefs game. I was like, no, we are not losing Lamar Jackson and this Ravens renaissance for the playoffs. That's insanity. But it was ultimately came down to, in my opinion, the play calling. Because in the regular season, the Ravens, as we know, went 8 for 8 on 4th and short situations. In this game, 0 for 2. And I don't mind the 0 for 2. In fact, I agree with those decisions, and I agree with the play calling quarterback sneaks, as we know, are uber efficient. But the Titans' play calling on the other end, in my opinion, outside of the 5 drops, were the 2 major X factors in this game. Because not only did they stuff Lamar Jackson, and then Derrick Henry exploded on the ensuing play for a 66-yard run, they had that big 45-yard play-action touchdown to Khalif Raymond on the very next play after stuffing Lamar Jackson the next time. So it was just literally getting the ball back and immediately taking a shot and giving themselves a chance to overpower the Ravens, and that's what they did.
Yeah, Arthur Smith deserves a lot more credit than probably I gave him all season long. It's really showed up down the stretch. He's not doing things of, okay, we're only going to run the football in these situations. It's he's calling it perfectly to put them in a situation to win games. Just go win the game. I don't care how you do it. Just go win the game. I started making a list, Daigle, with how weird this game is. Because, we have hundreds, thousands of snaps throughout the entire season. But then it comes down to 53 snaps in a game, 60 snaps in a game, and how, passes or balls can just bounce the opposite direction and it leads to losses. Like the first interception that Lamar threw, they were driving. It was just a few inches high and it bounced off the tight end's hands. Then the Lamar Jackson tackle on the interception added another 15 yards. The Jonnu Smith touchdown that he caught in the back left of the end zone was this miraculous grab that, his left side touches right before he falls out of bounds while still juggling it. That was 3rd and goal from the 13, which just adds to Arthur Smith and Ryan Tannehill being unbelievable in the red zone. There was communication issues between the Ravens sideline, between the coaches, but since they're the home team, the Titans were still able to communicate using headsets. They were stopped on 4th and 1, like you mentioned, in the second quarter, because Lamar didn't follow his left guard. They stopped on 4th and 1 in the third quarter. Seth Roberts drops, Willie Snead drops on 3rd and 12. Every single time it was and this might not be the right way to say it, but a 50-50 situation and went in the Titans' favor. But Daigle, that just happens in one game sample sizes like this, and that's just exactly what happened to the Ravens. I think they beat them 8 out of 10 times, and maybe that's not fair. Maybe that's not the type of analysis people want out there. Just seemed like this wasn't the time for it to happen in this Ravens game, and the Ravens team, they could just never jumpstart it.
In hindsight, I guess we should have been a little wary about sluggishness because the Ravens hadn't played a meaningful game in 20 days, but not this. This was sluggish pretty much for the entirety of play. Like the Titans just outright dominating them. And I keep looking to this red zone offense for the Titans. Just the fact that in the playoffs, Ryan Tannehill has only totaled 29 attempts and 160 passing yards and 2 postseason wins total, and yet they've gone 5 for 5 in the red zone because Tannehill is making the plays. He's just super efficient when he needs to be. Deep shots as well from him every single game. So he's playing just so well right now. And this is going to lead us down a big argument about offensive regression in the offseason. And there are still pieces to gauge, right? Because Derrick Henry's a free agent, Ryan Tannehill's a free agent. We expect both to be back. But that doesn't mean there has to be immediate regression. They can absolutely continue this. They only have 2 pending games left, and that's it. Like, this train can continue riding on. And I just literally cannot even express how impressed I am.
I talked about living in the football bubble with Ian. I want to do the same thing with you because we're in the streak with Derrick Henry, 3 straight games of 180 yards. This 66-yard run he had in the third quarter was rare. I mean, he shrugged off a clean hit by Matthew Judon, then avoided Brandon Carr in the hole, rumbles for another, 60 yards after that. Does running back matter? Does Derrick Henry matter? Because, again, Daigle, we live in this world where it's like these blanket statements should be applied for every single team, and there should only be one way for teams to win and be most efficient, and that's the only way to do it. Yet here you have the Titans just bucking that completely, and I absolutely eat it up. I absolutely love it.
I was trying to decide what Henry gauges on the open market, because if Zeke reset the market with $15 million per year, I thought Henry came in at 11 to 13, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe he's worth more. I really don't even know, because this streak he's on is just insane, and they obviously lean on him. We can look back at his last 4 games from last season, because that's when they just started giving to him on every down, and that's when his outbreak really started. And in that time, so 21 games played since, he has totaled 454 carries, 2,500 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 5.5 yards per carry. And that's a 21-game sample, postseason included. So I don't know what he makes, to be honest, when he becomes a free agent this offseason. I don't know if running back matters as a whole, but I know Derrick Henry matters to the Titans right now.
And look, if this was their identity and Ryan Tannehill started all season long, we have no idea what their win-loss record might be at the end of the year. It might still have been 9-7. Who knows? But, that 9-7 can kind of go out the window once you reach the playoffs. And they're the 6th seed. And all you have to do is put it together for 4 games. And to me, that's a winning formula that can happen in a 4-game stretch. And then they go on to the Chiefs next. And that's an offense that's a different animal, very different than what the Ravens present. But to me, Daigle, this is the type of game plan that can work in this small of a sample size when randomness factors in. I do want to say that I don't think Lamar Jackson was bad in this game. Now, I'm not saying that Lamar Jackson was good. I think he was somewhere in the middle because the 3 turnovers were very un-Lamar Jackson-like. And then you also can add the 2 4th and 1 non-conversions that could be viewed as turnovers as well. So that's 5 in this game. He was trying to do too much in some of those, like the Kenny Vaccaro pass on the left side, the fumble, obviously, in the pocket. But you also had Lamar, a 3rd and 10 conversion to Hollywood Brown, a 3rd and 6 conversion to Mark Andrews, a 3rd and 16 on his own 5-yard line, a ridiculous 3rd and 14 throw to Hollywood Brown down to the 4-yard line with just 11 seconds left, a long run on 2nd and 17. We still saw moments in this game where Lamar was able to have Lamar Jackson type segments, yet it wasn't something he could chain together. It seemed like, to me at least, Daigle, the Titans did a very good job of forcing him to run towards the sideline rather than being able to plant his foot and cut upfield.
And I would argue that first Willie Snead dropped on 3rd and long, followed by the Seth Roberts drop on 3rd and long, and a few drives later, like those plays were just so massive. Not like I don't believe in momentum, but just the fact that they were staring down the barrel of a 1-score, 2-score deficit. Like they have to get rolling at some point. And right when they finally start piecing plays together, their own receiving core just sort of dropped the ball, no pun intended. So it felt like as a whole, it wasn't Jackson's fault for sure. I thought he played pretty well as well. Obviously, 59 pass attempts, 16 more than he had thrown in any other game this year is not ideal. That's not the Ravens style of play. But it just seemed like everyone sort of dropped the ball on this one.
Derrick Henry's last 4 games, 30 carries, 195, 34 carries, 182 and a score, 32 carries, 211 yards, and 3 touchdowns, then 21 carries before that. I mean, what a streak. And we haven't even seen A.J. Brown have to make a play in a game that completely changes it, and that can happen at any moment that he touches the ball. Since we're closing on this game, Daigle, time for one good, one bad from the Ravens. I'll do it because I'm much more well-rested than you, and you can just add on to it if you want to. The good for the Ravens is despite the coaching search going on and now concluding basically unless some massive surprise happens, the Ravens are going back into 2020 with both of their coordinators, Greg Roman on offense, Wink Martindale on defense. And that's somewhat shocking with just how good both sides of the ball are. So, I think everyone on their offense is under contract for the 2020 season, and regression hits no matter who you are. But this is a team that I think, because of the style, unless, defense can catch up, but I still think that they change so much offensively week to week, that I think they're in a really, really good place offensively for next year.
And 19 of 22 starters under contract.
Okay.
All 11 on offense as well. I don't know if you said that, but yes.
I kind of did. Anyways, the bad news for the Ravens is, and we hinted at this, Daigle, at least I did, that what if these 2 weeks off, these 3 weeks off, it's a slow start and the Titans go up by 14 points. Well, that happened here. Is this a team that can have their Patrick Mahomes moment offensively? And that's what I view as a question. It's not necessarily bad. It's an I don't know. Do they have the firepower? Do they have the type of offense that can come back and win? I'm not saying their offense is like Georgia Tech at the college level or Navy, where, if those teams, because they're true option offenses, that if they go down, that they can't come back, because I think Lamar Jackson is still underrated as a passer. But we just haven't seen it, at least in this game when it mattered most. They seem to come back and win a la the Chiefs because, at least at that point, obviously passing the ball is far more efficient than running the ball.
And they'll add pieces, so perhaps they'll help themselves in the offseason. I don't have the exact number in front of me. I believe they have $31 million in cap space, 33. So this offense, I imagine, will only get better. Losing Seth Roberts to unrestricted free agency and hopefully getting Miles Boykin more reps, maybe that'll do something in his second year. But yeah, that will be a game plan is to try to expand, which is what I think they'll do.
Let's go on to the final game of the weekend. That was the San Francisco 49ers beating the Minnesota Vikings 27-10. Daigle, this was an absolute stomping. From the start, it was. On that first drive, the 49ers scored a touchdown. Jimmy Garoppolo threw 6 pass attempts in that first drive. The rest of the game, Daigle, only had to throw 13 times. To me, this was absolute domination, and it speaks to just how good the 49ers are, that they've battled through and stuck it out through all the injuries that they had all season long. And now they're one of the healthiest teams that they've been all season long, all year long. And look what we have, a team that just dominates a complete team like the Minnesota Vikings.
I've been on that side with you of the table. Whenever we look at each other, when Pat or Ian say something, we roll our eyes. So I know when I repeated what you said, you definitely rolled your eyes, and Josh and Chris laughed at you. I've seen it too many times. Anyways, though, I actually had that in my notes as well, utter domination, because 21 first downs to Minnesota 7. And when they led San Francisco 14-10 at the half, they had 14 first down to Minnesota's 4 at that point. It really didn't feel at any point like the Vikings had a lead, or it didn't feel like the Vikings were prepared to come back. Like, they even had the game tied 7-7 after that Stephon Diggs touchdown. But it really didn't feel like this was a team that could compete with the Niners. Like you said, utter domination, especially defensively, getting everyone back healthy finally.
Yeah, other than that 41-yard toss to Stephon Diggs, I believe Kirk Cousins only completed 131 passing yards throughout the rest of the game.
131 yards, a pick, 28 attempts, which was 4.6 yards per attempt outside of that one touchdown.
And look, I'm not trying to crush Jimmy Garoppolo by saying, he only had to throw the ball 13 times after that first drive. That's just what the situation calls for with Kyle Shanahan. That's why this is the best, maybe the best roster in the NFL right now. It's the most complete, I think, in my opinion, from offensive playmakers to defensive playmakers. In fact, Jimmy had a great throw. That Emmanuel Sanders crossing route, crossing the formation, ready to throw it over top of Anthony Barr. That was very good coverage by Anthony Barr. Now, that's a difficult situation for a linebacker to be in, trying to backtrack and cover a crossing wide receiver, but it was a good throw in those situations. Sure, he made that mistake throwing into Eric Kendricks, and there were a lot of times, when he had to hold the ball longer than he expected to, and the offensive line really held up. But to me, this is just a situation where one team had no chance because of just, one, how well coached the 49ers are, and two, just how much better their roster is, and three, they didn't allow the Vikings ever to get into the flow of game that they wanted to. Dalvin Cook finished the game with 9 carries for 18 yards. 9 carries for 18 yards with a long run of 6. This is a player who I think has the highest rate of runs where he crosses the line of scrimmage at 15 miles per hour or higher, and he wasn't allowed to do that once in this game.
It was very clear the concerted effort was to stop Dalvin Cook every single time he touched the ball and just force Kirk Cousins to make a play. And he did that one play, as we talked about. But outside of that, yes, it was just absolutely nothing. Dalvin Cook even catching the ball, 6 catches, a majority of them at or behind the line of scrimmage. And again, it didn't matter because of the swarming defense. I still got a kick. I really enjoyed the Nick Bosa potentially getting injured, and then the crowd starts chanting louder like he's Hulk, and then like he's Hulk Hogan, he starts slowly shaking and getting up, and then starts like cheering himself on.
Yeah, wrestling is life, right, Daigle? Isn't that what I learned when I hang out with you?
Wrestling is life, and George Kittle and the Niners are fun.
I really have nothing else to say about this game. Do you? If not, we can just close the book on the Vikings season because it's an interesting one. I mean, the good, I'm not sure what the good is necessarily. This is what the easy one is going to be for my takeaway. You have Danielle Hunter on your roster. Danielle Hunter is the fastest player in NFL history to reach 50 sacks, the youngest, I should say. And we need to spotlight that more often. So I'm taking this moment because there's a lot of questions heading in for this team going into 2020, Daigle. But I just want to take a quick moment to recognize Danielle Hunter as the good for this team heading into next year.
I think another good would be Dalvin Cook staying healthy because we did have injury concerns coming into the year. And not only was he healthy, he was extremely explosive post-injury this year, and he will likely get a lucrative extension now.
The bad, one, new offensive coordinator in 2020, and now new defensive coordinator in 2020. I'm not sure you saw that, but I believe this morning George Edwards, the defensive coordinator, was fired. Now, Mike Zimmer is basically the defensive coordinator. I believe he's the one who calls the plays. But that's a lot of change. And then the one position that's not changing, Daigle, is the quarterback position. Kirk Cousins still has that guaranteed contract. This is going to be the final year on it. And just watching this game, obviously the 49ers so often were allowed to stay inside of structure. And when they weren't, the quarterback was still given time. On the Minnesota Vikings side, one, their offensive line isn't as good. But two, I'm not sure if Kirk Cousins has the ability to make like one play outside of structure when they need it most. And he didn't do it in this game. And so now your offensive identity is basically going to stay the same with Gary Kubiak maybe even taking a larger role. But I think the flow, we talked about flow with the Vikings. The flow has to hit for the Vikings to be competitive for long stretches of the playoff season.
Yeah, the Stefanski hiring from Cleveland was actually my bad takeaway for the Vikings as well, because I do wonder the next man up, if Kubiak or whomever uses play action, because that's where Kirk Cousins in this offense truly thrived. Cousins completed 71.8% of his passes for 14 touchdowns and 9.7 yards per attempt from play action this season. And with Stephon Diggs demanding a trade mid-season and that whole fiasco, I do wonder if not only they lose Stefanski, but maybe they lose Diggs as well, which would downgrade Cousins and this offense as a whole immensely.
Something to watch moving forward. We'll be back later on this week to preview the championship games. Yes, the AFC is up first. Tennessee at Kansas City. That's Sunday at 3:05 Eastern. And then Green Bay at San Francisco is that same day, 6:40 Eastern. Daigle will be back in studio later this week. You have fun, man. Enjoy your, I'm not going to say time off because I'm sure you'll be working. You'll be mingling. But, you know, just if you ever catch yourself thinking about me back here at headquarters in the newsroom, just sitting by myself in my lonesome in the newsroom, you know, maybe you shed a tear about that.
I will say, whatever the case, 3-hour pods, I prefer to stick with 11:30 in the morning rather than 8:30. This is not ideal.
This is why we pulled you to the East Coast, Daigle. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Again, we'll be back later on this week to preview these only 3 games left, and 2 more later on this week. For Daigle, for Ian, I'm Josh. Talk to y'all soon. See ya.